welcome to Peggy's podcast. I'm Peggy Vasquez, and I'm so grateful that you decided to tune in today to listen to this special podcast with my amazing friend, April Stallworth. But before I get there, I just want to pause for a moment and say thank you. Thank you to you, our listeners, for being here, for doing whatever it is that you're doing while you're listening or watching this podcast. Maybe you're getting ready for the day. Maybe you're going for a walk, you're cooking dinner, whatever it is. I just want to let you know that from my heart to your heart, thank you. Thank you for being here, for a possibility of opening up your mind to new ideas, to some new thoughts. Today's podcast is incredibly important to me because I've been there. I've been there in the background, being married to a Hispanic man and having mixed children and grandchildren. When I say that I've been in the background, I've seen racism. I've seen it up close and personal. I've seen it affect my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my family, and our world. And it's time. It's time to make a change. It's time to make a positive change. And even though I've seen it, what I've discovered recently is that I haven't walked in the shoes of a brown person, of a brown woman, of a person of color. I've been in the background and I've seen it. And that alone is painful enough, but I haven't had to wear that burden each and every day of my life. I asked April to join me today to have a real conversation. April is authentic, she's brilliant, she's educated, she's passionate. So I chose her specifically because I know that she has insights and stories and information that can help you. We met a few years ago at an administrative professionals conference, and April is the type of person that if she's in the room, you know she's there. She's not going to hide in the corner. And so I saw her. I knew she was there. And yet it was April that had the courage to come over and introduce herself to me. And it wasn't very long before we started having a conversation more than about our profession. We quickly moved into personal stories and dreams and goals and the things that we wanted to do in this big world of ours. We are passionate women who want to make a difference. And that's why I consider April my soul sister. So I'm ecstatic that she is here. Two main reasons why I chose April for this conversation. Number one, because she's brilliant. And number two, because of her education and her experience in diversity and inclusion and her involvement with women. So help me welcome April Stallworth. Hi.
Hi. I'm so glad to be here with you today. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
Oh, gosh, it's so good. So good to be with you. Tell us a little bit about you, April.
Sure. So by full-time work, I'm an executive assistant in a large school district that's in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I've been doing executive assistant work 30 plus years. So that's my full-time bread and butter. Also have my own side consulting, training, coaching business, and it's called Strong Women, Strong Lives. And I help women realize their potential, their worth, their purpose in life. And I also work to help administrative support professionals see how valuable they are and how important they are to the workspace. So I do a lot of speaking. Well, I used to do a lot of speaking before COVID.
Before COVID, right?
But still now virtually to help administrative support professionals. I am what they call an author for LinkedIn Learning. So I have LinkedIn training courses available out there on the LinkedIn Learning platform. And then I've also, as of recent, over the last couple of years, been involved in some racial reconciliation work, which was more than timely for what our world is facing today. But I've been doing that work primarily with my home church, because I'm a woman of faith as well, which I always share because that's a part of who I am. I am currently in seminary. So I'm also working to complete my education on that level. And I'm starting a brand new program in the fall that's called Transformative Justice. So I'm a justice girl. I'm very interested in social justice issues and specifically surrounding the prison population and mass incarceration. So it's a little bit of everything. And
Oh, goodness.
yeah.
So much. I mean, this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is because you've got involvement all over the place. Tell us what your website is one more time.
It is www.strongwomenstronglives.com. And that gives more information about me and the things that I do. But I have to correct you on one thing, PV, about how we met and all that. She's so modest. But after, I stalked her, okay? Let's be honest, I stalked her on LinkedIn for a while. I got a chance to sit under her teaching at some of the administrative professional conferences where Peggy was teaching at. And then we had the opportunity to work together on a session. And I, like she said though, which is so true, I just took advantage of the opportunity to spend some time with her and get to know her. And the rest is history. We've been hanging out ever since.
Yes. And I got to say, I have so much respect for people like you who have the courage, whether you want to call it stalking or not, but building your network, right? Meeting people. And you were just the type of person, the way that you approached me, I mean, I felt like I could trust you and that we could have a real conversation. So let's get back to the conversation about today, because I know you and I could talk all day long.
Girl.
So tell me, why is this topic about race so important to you and close to your heart and mind?
Sure. So clearly, I'm a woman of color. Let y'all in a little secret. I've been a woman of color all my life. So I've grown up in America. And so I've experienced race from that lens. And what's interesting is that, and I don't like to speak for my entire race, but I have a lot of friends and family, of course, that I speak to. And what seems to happen is that definitely in Black families, race is talked about all the time.
Yeah.
In our relationships, in our circles, in our sphere of influence, we have conversations about race a lot of times in most Black families. But in primarily white families, race isn't talked about that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it then becomes harder for white people to talk about race because it's not something that you just normally do, where it's something we always do. And so what's important to me is that we start to break down the issue with talking about race so that it's comfortable for us to have conversations about something that is so prevalent in our society and in our country, and especially in light of the current racial unrest. We have to find a way where we can talk about race in a non-hostile way. And you and I are prime examples of people who have done that. I've done that with a lot of people. And I just don't want it to be controversial. I don't want it to be political. I just want it to be a human interaction that we can talk about difficult topics in a way where you're not shamed, I'm not aggressive, that it's okay. We can talk about this. We can work through some issues. We can both leave the conversation feeling good about ourselves, maybe having to ponder some things, maybe having to rethink some things, but that we're both whole and we both have learned and we're educated. It's just so important, not only in our personal relationships, but it's going to be super, super important when many of us return to the workplace, because we've been out of the workplace during a really period of unrest in our country. But we got to be able to have these conversations in order to move our nation forward. So important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I embarrassingly felt that because I was married to a Hispanic man and had brown children, friends, and family, that I thought I was exempt, from all of this racial unrest, and that I didn't have anything to learn. And boy, was I wrong. I was completely wrong. I mean, I reached out to April and to some other friends, and they all encouraged me to get educated. And so the first book that I read was White Fragility, and then just recently read So You Want to Talk About Race. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm the type that dog ears and highlights books like crazy, when it speaks to me. And these books, I mean, I highly recommend, if you haven't read these books, I highly recommend them, because they're going to open up your mind. You're going to help you see things that you didn't see. I thought I knew. I thought I understood. And I was so wrong. I was completely wrong. I didn't think that I had any racism in me. And what I learned is that when you grow up in a racist country, you have racism in you. It's in you. It's planted in you. There's no way to escape it. It's in you. And so these books will help you to understand that, to help you discover it, to peel back that onion, so to speak, to help you to understand what you can do to make positive change. So let's get into it. First question for you. Why is it that we don't need to take responsibility for the past, but that we must for the present and the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have to acknowledge the past, but what I don't want white folks to do is to necessarily feel shame and guilt about what their ancestors have done.
Right.
It's important to learn this information. It's important to educate ourselves, to not stay in ignorance, because if we do that, we are apt to repeat the past. And I don't think anybody of sound mind wants to do that. So it's so critical that this generation and the younger generation, that we educate ourselves. And that includes people of color too, because I'm learning on this journey too. It doesn't mean as a woman of color, I know everything, because I've read White Fragility too. Haven't read that other one yet, but I'm gonna. So I'm educating myself as well to things that I was even ignorant to. So I'm using this time as well, because in this work, no one ever arrives. No one ever arrives. We are on a journey until the grave, if we commit to it, where we are being enlightened, we are being educated, we are removing ignorance, because we don't learn a lot of this stuff in school.
Right.
A lot of our history has been whitewashed. By that I mean brown and black faces have been removed from it. We gloss over full history, and we learn what the system has designed for us to learn. And it's not the truth. And so the more we can educate ourselves, the more we can, let me put it this way. I saw a meme once that said, white folks, we're not asking you to take responsibility for what your ancestors did. We're asking you to acknowledge it and dismantle the systems that they created.
There you go.
That pretty much puts it in a nutshell.
Yes, that puts it into great perspective. So I heard you say, excuse me, that this isn't about shame or guilt. This is about discovering the truth in order to make a difference. So tell me more about your thoughts on that.
I think shame and guilt are negative emotions. I think they can have a tendency to keep us stuck in negative feelings and in a posture that's not healthy. And we can think about that in a variety of different circumstances, with things people have suffered in their past. And shame and guilt is just not the emotion we want to have with this. I use a word, and we've talked about it, lament.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be able to lament. And when I say lament, that means we want to acknowledge the past. We want to sit in some of the pain. We want to empathize with brown and Black people who have suffered great injustices in our country. We want to understand on a level that we can feel it in our hearts. And we were talking before, I kind of equate it to what the country went through during 9/11. And much respect to all the families who lost loved ones during that time in our nation's history. I lived in New Jersey when 9/11 happened. So I was real close to Manhattan. I lived and worked at a church, a mega church at the time. And so we had a lot of members who worked in New York City or who worked close or in the towers. And so that day was crazy, trying to locate our church members and stuff, make sure everybody was safe. And I just remember that time in our history that from Alaska to Maine, we were all heartbroken at the attack that was an outside attack.
Yes.
On our soil, and the number of people, first responders who were killed and affected and are still living the effects of that time today. Mm-hmm. And we lamented as a country, as a world, our allies and the people, the other countries that stood with us and ready to defend us. We lamented. We were just brokenhearted, even though it may not have affected us directly, although many families were directed,
yes, directly affected.
Directly affected.
Yes.
We still felt deeply. We couldn't feel exactly what they were feeling, but we felt something deeply. I think it's similar in terms of that feeling we need to have in terms of race relations and history of our country. So be in lament, but don't stay in lament, because after we have that, then we have to have action behind the lament. So don't stay stuck in shame and guilt. Don't even say stuck in lament. Move through it so that then, okay, got it.
Yes.
How can I help change it?
But take that moment to really feel it, to embrace it in. I had told you earlier, April, that when all of this racial divide first was extremely highlighted, I had reached out to several of my Black and brown friends and had asked how they were doing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I did that I felt their pain. Not the same as they were, but I didn't understand that it was that heavy. I was reaching out to them more out of this sense of, I don't know what to do, but I need to do something. And when I heard back from them and about how grateful they were, and when they told me stories, I began to sit in that space with them. And I think that is so important, because if you don't get a sense of the pain, of the burden, then you may not have the motivation to want to stand up, to speak up, to take action.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I was one of those people that you reached out to, and I was grateful for that. And you just said, "How are you doing?" Mm-hmm. Not okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just devastated after, many of us saw the video of George Floyd being killed. And then prior to that, Ahmaud Arbery, about Breonna Taylor, just name after name after name. It was critical for me to hear from my white colleagues, my white friends, my sister girlfriends, like that just called me, text me, email me. And then I remember you specifically saying, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, what, after you asked me how I was doing? And I said, pray.
Pray.
You to educate yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you to reach out to your brown and black friends and colleagues. It makes a world of difference, a world of difference. And because Peggy Vasquez is an overachiever, next time I heard from her, she was at a protest.
Yeah, not something I'd ever done before, not something that I would have ever thought I would do. But I mean, I looked at my little grandbaby, and I'm looking at her, this 5-year-old girl, and at some point in time, she's going to be 10, she's going to be 15, she's going to be 20. At some point in time, she's going to say, Nana, what did you do back then? And if I could only say, well, I put a few things on Facebook, I thought, I can't do that. I can't live with knowing that that was the only action I took. And I saw another, I'm sure she was a mother, at a protest, and her sign said that when George Floyd called out for his mom,
Yes.
a summons to all moms, and that was my sign. And again, me taking that stand was hoping to open up somebody's heart.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get to somebody's heart as a mom, God help you. God help you. So, yeah. But I was scared because of all the things I've seen on media about protests. I was scared to go, and thankfully, it wasn't like that. And what was great is I was standing with my family, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, a couple of my nieces and their daughters, and my bestie's friend. I mean, it was a beautiful demonstration of our community coming together in love. There wasn't anger. And, that moves me to the next question I want to ask you. So often what I see happens is that when people talk about race, anger comes up. Defensiveness comes up. Sometimes people attacking each other, blaming each other. And it seems like that there's a whole lot of talking going on, but nobody listening. So what are some ways to keep the conversation going instead of silencing people?
Right. Well, yeah, it's saddened me. It grieves my heart when I see conversations just go left. And so I know I personally, for myself, have been trying to muster up as much grace as I possibly can in these seasons. And but it can't just be about grace. It's got to be about truth too. So
right.
I can't always be the one to stand down and to just let you sit in your ignorance either. So similar to what we do in the workplace and what we've learned in terms of conflict and stuff like that, we got to listen, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. We have to try to educate, okay, as best as we can. But in order to educate, we have to be educated. So don't go out there putting your toe in the water, because before you know, you're going to get pulled in. If you don't know how to swim, you know what's going to happen. So do the work in you first. Work on, and speak from a place of conviction of what you know rather than always what you feel. But you can only do that when you take time to really understand and educate yourself. Some conversations are not worth having on social media. They're just not. There's some things I just scroll by, and I'm like, I'm not doing that today.
Mm-hmm.
It's bait. It's divisive bait. Don't take it. But
Mm-hmm.
people who I'm in relationship with, or who are really trying to learn, or where I feel I can be helpful to the conversation, that I'm going to try to have an intelligent conversation. But if at some point it goes left and you see, get out of that, back out of that. That won't help you, and that's not going to help them. So I know when I post, when I respond, one of the questions I try to ask is what I'm saying, is what I'm posting, is what I'm doing, is it bringing us closer together, or is it divisive?
Mm-hmm.
Educating, or is it me speaking out of my frustration? I really try to check myself before I'm having those kind of conversations, because they can be super divisive. We don't need to add to any more of that. And I know people of color, y'all tired. I know y'all tired. I'm tired. I get so tired of having to talk about this sometimes. I'm not tired today. I love this conversation.
Good.
What I make sure I do is good self-care, good self-care. Because if I enter into any of these conversations and I have not practiced good self-care, really fueled myself, energized myself, it's going to go the wrong way. And I can only take responsibility for me. I can't take responsibility for what the other person is saying.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just making sure before I have those kind of conversations that I'm practicing good self-care and really staying fueled up and energized. And then, which means sometimes I got to take a couple of days off.
Mm-hmm.
I just do.
Mm-hmm.
I on social media. I'm not reading anything. I'm watching an episode of Supermarket Stakeout.
Completely just giving yourself a break, mentally, physically, just getting away from it. I love that. I think it's something
Yep.
we all need. I mean, now that we've got great weather, it's to me that's a pool day. Just being able to just chill, just completely.
Yep.
Chill. Yes.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we in corporate America, we've tried to talk about race. We've tried to deal with racism through affirmative action, through D&I, through all these different things. And I think that they've helped make a little bit of a difference, but
Mhm.
obviously there's so much work to do. If those were the answers, we wouldn't be where we're at today. When I think about the true problem, it's that we don't have relationships with people who don't look like us.
Yeah.
Most of us have relationships. We build our inner circle, we build our network, we hang out with people who look like us. So what would you say, what advice do you have to broaden those circles and to intentionally broaden your circle and have people in your inner circle who don't look like you?
Yes. Super, super important. Such a great question. I'm going to use us for an example. But before I even go there, I'm going to say, people of color, we don't have a choice. White folks are going to be in our world, one way or another. Whereas white folks, and this goes to privilege, you can choose whether that's going to be the case for you or not in most instances. But
I never thought of it that way.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, from a personal aspect. Now, as workplaces diversify more and more, you won't have a choice there. You're going to end up with people of color on your team. You may end up with a person of color as your boss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that you make some changes. But I'm going to talk about us as an example. Well, first of all, I was, like I said, I stalked Peggy a little bit. Really intrigued. One of the things I was intrigued with, and I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, is her last name is Vasquez. Is she
Mexican?
is she a Latina? She don't look like it though. And that's my own bias coming in right there. You see?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I had it happen.
yeah. So I was intrigued by that. And so that was part of why I was attracted to you. I was like, what is that about?
Yeah.
Maybe she's married to a lab man. And I was right. Shout out. Okay. But so just curiosity. And just seeing our similarities in terms of you were working EA at the time, you're now full-time
Mm-hmm.
mentor. But you were working EA, but yet you had a side hustle, you were speaking, you were teaching, all that. So I first of all looked at our similarities because we really do have more the same than different. If we
Absolutely.
really looked at it. So I focused on the similarities. And then I happen to just be the one to put myself out there. Not that you haven't put yourself out there in situations too.
Mm-hmm.
Courage to just make the relationships. But today, it's critical. You don't have a choice. You have to. So if you don't, just know it's not optional anymore. You have to have people in your circle who look different than you, even have different political views.
Yes.
Other podcast, whole other podcast. Who have different political views, religious views,
Yes.
look different, eat different food, all that. That's the world we live in. We can't bury our head in the sand and say, eat with people that look like me. Everything shifted around Memorial Day. It shifted, and we can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to do that. There are people in your circle that maybe you've never even considered before. There are people who work where you work. There are people who go to church where you go to church. And if there aren't, you need to seek out broader and more diverse relationships. You can start online. That's less intimidating, but LinkedIn is worldwide. Now I'm a LinkedIn girl because
Yes, me too.
but it's worldwide. I interact because of the course that I have. I get connections from people all over the world, and I love it.
Yes.
I learn about how they speak. I learn about where they work. I learn about what's important to them. They share how my course has helped them. I love it. So if you don't have it, now's the time. You have to have those relationships. And if you're not sure where to start, because maybe you don't have people of color in your purview, because there are people whose most of their circles of influence are of just one variety. Start out online. The people are there. They're waiting to connect with you. People are open in a way they haven't been before. And I think we need to take advantage of that.
That is great advice. That is such great advice. You know, it's what goes through my mind is as you expand your circle with people who don't look like you, who don't have the same beliefs or political views or religion or cultural, I mean, all of those things, as you expand your circle, your mind expands.
Yes.
And that's where the possibilities exist.
Yes.
You know, it's like, I love it when you and I will have a catch-up session and we'll brainstorm something together because we both always get something out of it because we're not the same, right? And it's not about race. It's about your experiences, your background, what you've been through, and same for me. And then we come together. So yes. But I think this is the biggest piece is we've got to make those relationships happen. If we had relationships, we wouldn't have to wonder why everyone around the leadership table was white.
Hello.
We wouldn't have to worry about, well, did we invite my Black friend to this event? Because you would have relationships with those people. You would naturally bring them with you instead of, oh, well, we don't have any. You know,
why don't we not have any? Start asking that question. Look at the important moments in your life. You know, the Facebook pictures you put up. Who's in those?
Yes.
Who's in those? And that's a challenge to myself too.
Right.
I'm usually operating in a white dominated space. I most of my personal moments that you're going to see is going to be filled with a bunch of Black people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have white friends. I do. I'm on here with one. I do. I absolutely do. But I'm just saying, from a perspective of a woman of color who usually has to operate in white dominated spaces, when I can go,
Yeah.
ah,
Right.
a lot of those moments are going to be with Black and brown people for me. I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to challenge myself that I have people like a Peggy Vasquez in my life that I ain't got to go,
Right.
be me.
Yes.
Loves me.
Yes. And I think that that is also a key point, is that you don't have to pretend, right? You don't have to pretend. You can still be your authentic self, even if you are different. Even if you are different, it's not like I'll see people try to take on Black mannerisms, change their language up, do different vocabulary, different mannerisms. And, I've seen people do that, and I'm sure I've done it too. And there's been times where I thought that that was relatable or fun or something. And now I realize that's flat out rude. It's, I mean, is that how you feel when somebody changes up and tries to act like you?
Yeah, you kind of side eyeing them like, what is that?
Yeah.
Doing?
Right.
Kind of let it like duck water roll off your back because you know what it is, and so you just say, yeah, they reaching, they trying.
They're trying.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I know the person's heart and I know them greater than that, I'm more apt to overlook it because I know that they love me. They
Right.
just being a little
They're just
off.
trying. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's another really good point, is that as we grow our circles, as we take on these new things that we're talking about, the chances are we're going to fall short. We're going to make a mistake. We're going to embarrass ourselves. We're going to, make a blunder somehow, right?
Absolutely.
And I loved when you said earlier, it's about grace and giving each other grace and giving ourselves grace, because taking action, even if you don't get it on just right, is better than sitting back and doing nothing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. We are going to have those awkward moments. I'm going to talk about an awkward moment. And I didn't clear this with Peggy before I'm going to say it, but I think she's going to be okay with it. And even us. And we have a great relationship, but we're different. We're learning. We're growing. I remember we did an interview once. I interviewed you.
Yes.
And the space was predominantly white.
Yes.
That we were in.
It was.
But it was successful. It was a great event. It was awesome. And then I got up out of there.
You did. You did.
You text me. You sensed something.
Yes, and I said, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Why did you disappear?"
Right. You said something. I never said anything.
Yeah.
I was my regular self, and I'm sure nobody else saw it because they didn't know me. They didn't know me. So I'm just da 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 da, and I was like, "Okay, Peggy, take care.
Bye.
See you later." And you text me later, and I was stunned, just stunned that you caught that and that you said something. You said, "Are you okay?"
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And you said, I said, "Why?" You said, "Because something was off." And you left quickly. What? Did I do anything? Did I say anything? Whatever. And then I came clean. I said, I have to be honest. That was a white dominated space.
It was.
I had to get out of there because it was just, it was closing in on me. We did a great job, and I knew you had it from there, and I needed to get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no reason to say sorry. You did nothing.
And so let's talk about that, because I think that that is a significant point too. When you said that it was closing in on you and you had to get out of there, what did, I mean, I think I know, but
Hmm.
tell me more about that.
Yeah. Um, I felt a little ignored, not from you. I felt a little ignored. I felt a little overlooked. Um, I felt like I wasn't being seen in that moment. I remember letting some folks in to the space. I just happened to be the one to open the door and letting folks into the space. I don't remember them even saying hi to me,
Oh gosh.
right past me. And
Wow.
most, and some of it could have been just about me
Yeah.
because of my experience in my past and having to deal in some of these awkward spaces. So I'm not even going to put it all on the people that were there. I'll even take some of what was bubbling up due to kind of past trauma that, for lack of a better word, almost felt like the hired help.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Again, I think that's so important, because if we're not sensitive to it, like, to me, you were with me and hanging out
Mm-hmm.
and doing the interview with me, and I was happy
Mm-hmm.
to be there with you and invited some other people to join. It was
Mm-hmm.
fun and good, and I wasn't sensitive to that fact. You
Yeah,
know,
but you got it.
I I felt it, but I wasn't. So I think it's important for us to really look and see who's in the room, and probably overly welcome or actively make sure that everyone feels like they belong,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
everyone's valued, that everyone's there for a reason. Where because I knew how I felt about you, I didn't think about the influence that you may feel from anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's a really
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
We're trying to broaden our circles to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah. And having diverse rooms.
Yes, absolutely.
Important to have, yeah, diverse rooms. And we weren't even thinking about that. We just
No,
people that
right.
know and that can come and support and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we said all of that to say, even in good, solid relationships, you can still have some of those kind of moments outside of you. And so I just love that you were sensitive to know something was happening.
Mm-hmm.
We're able to talk about it, and process through it, and that we both learned from that experience. Although, albeit uncomfortable to maybe even have to address and talk about, but we talked about it and we kept it rolling. We were good after that.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I think it somewhat goes back to emotional intelligence, right?
Mm,
And being aware of the people around you. And if you sense something weird, to ask, right?
yep.
Just to ask the question.
Yeah.
So now our last topic. So having conversations about race for most of us is uncomfortable. It's awkward. And I read in this book, she referred to several times about we've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
So if you have thoughts about how to get comfortable, I mean, is it more about well, it's not easy to eat healthy every day, but you got to do it if you want to look good. I mean, what would you say to somebody who was afraid of that discomfort?
Yeah. That's a good example of what you talk about, eating healthy, exercise. I think about us as speakers, how we get to the point of being comfortable. Now, I don't know about you, Peggy, but I always still get a little butterflies before speaking, and I
Absolutely.
think that's healthy. I really do, because then you don't get too cocky about it. But I think with all those things we're talking about, eating healthy, exercise, speaking, the way you get more comfortable with it is by doing it.
Yes.
There's no other way. You have to. The more we speak, the more, when I first started speaking, oh, what a mess. The cotton mouth, dry, get the cotton mouth.
Yes.
I was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew the only way to get comfortable was to keep speaking, keep speaking. Now I'm like, give me the mic. Hey, everybody. And not to say I still don't have a few butterflies, because I always want to keep those butterflies. I don't want to ever get so cocky, and I don't want to take my audience for granted. So, but now I feel an ease to it. I look forward to speaking. I miss speaking live. There's an energy that happens that's different than virtual. Not to say that virtual can't be good, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
When I was I've been on a health journey for the last couple of years, lost a lot of weight. When I first started out, exercising, eating right, it wasn't comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
The more I did it, the more it became a habit.
Right.
Now, if I don't do it, it feels uncomfortable. So the way we get more comfortable talking about race is to keep having the uncomfortable conversation,
Mm-hmm.
learning, to keep educating ourselves. And I really think that helps the comfort level. And you can really speak to that more as you've been getting into the work and having the conversations. Do you find it becoming easier to have the conversation?
I have found it easier, and I've also learned to pick up the signals about when to stop.
Good.
And when it's getting so, tension is okay, conflict is okay, but when it starts to feel like anger, when you start to get that emotion, it's time to move into a different conversation, right? I mean, one of the things that I know for certain is that discovering white privilege is painful. It is painful, and most white people don't want to admit it because it's so prevalent, and until you look at it and get educated about it, about what it is and where it is, and basically how I've used it, until you get open about that, I think that it blocks the racial conversation.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to pick up on those cues. And I've learned to ask more questions than to preach and to stand on my platform and tell, talk at somebody. And, some people are open and want to have the conversation, and some people want to stay right where they're at. And so it's like understanding that and knowing that you can continue the conversation when it's healthy to do so, and when it's not, it's not going to help make any positive change.
Yeah, that's really good. One quick word about privilege, since you mentioned white privilege, that I just want to say for my white brothers and sisters, is that privilege doesn't mean you didn't have a hard life. It just means that your skin color didn't make it harder.
Exactly.
So that's because privilege, I know a lot of people get stuck on that. Mm-hmm. Folks who have had a hard life, who've suffered abuse, who maybe grew up in really strained economic situations, feel like, don't tell me about privilege. You have no idea what I've gone through.
Right.
And what you have gone through is valid. It's just that being white was not the hardship.
Right. That's not what caused the hardship.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's important that people understand that, because I think there's a lot of confusion around privilege and when we white privilege.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I just want to sum it up with a quick thought about that. Now is the time. I mean, it's 2020. this year is a transformational year. We've had
Mhm.
COVID, we've this huge political divide. We've got this racial divide that's always been there, but now it's in our face. We've got so much going on that it is time. It is
Yes.
time to get educated, to stand up, to speak up, to take action, to make positive change, because we're better than this. We are better than this.
Amen.
We can be better than this. We can do better, so that we can create a country where we do have justice and equality for all. A country where we can be proud, a country where no matter what you look like, you've got a shot to go after
Yeah.
whatever it is that you dream about, and you've got an equal shot as anybody else who's willing to work. And, it just reminds me that this environment that we're in, it's basically a crisis, right? And a crisis is a challenge that cries out for action. It cries out for healing. And so we all get to choose where are we going to be at this moment in time? What's going to be our defining moment?
Yes.
And when we look back, think about these two questions. Number one, what do you want to be known for? And number two, what do you want to tell your children and your grandchildren about what you did in this moment in time?
Mm.
You think about those two things. I mean, those my heart. And so now, April, I just want to turn it over to you to close us out with any last thoughts that you have. And I want you to include, what do you hope that our listeners get out of today? And what positive change do you advise us to take? What actions do you advise us to take?
That's good. Um, I want the listeners to get out today that we have to have conversations like this, and that we can have meaningful, positive conversations like this. They don't have to be hostile. They don't have to be antagonistic. They may be difficult, but we need to have the courageous conversations surrounding race. Like Peggy said, now is the time. If not now, when
Yes.
are we going to do this? That's the first thing I want to emphasize. Second thing I want to emphasize is relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at your relationships. Who is in your circles? Be they professional, be they personal, be they at school, be they at church, at home. Take a real hard look at your relationship. White folks, Black folks, everybody, take a really hard look at your relationships. And are your circles the best for you to learn and grow and become more cognizant of the various peoples that we have the honor of being able to interact with in our country?
Yeah.
There's more people that I need to include in my circles that I have enough of. So all of us need to take a look at our relationships, at how we're willing and open to having conversations. And then lastly, we each have to take personal responsibility for our learning and our education and our growth in this area. We do individually. But racism is a systemic issue. It's not just about individual acts. It's about greater systems within our country that have made it difficult, deadly, over the course of our history for brown and Black people to advance in the same way white people. What am I doing, not only individually, but about the systems that I am a part of, and how am I working to help dismantle the ones that disadvantage brown and Black people?
Yes.
How am I doing that? And I love you, Peggy Vasquez, for doing this.
I love you.
Boss.
Oh my gosh, I love you. I totally do. I mean, I knew that this would be a powerful conversation, and man, it truly was. You made several comments throughout this whole podcast that we hadn't talked about before. You helped open up my mind, my heart, and that's my hope, that our listeners will have the same experience. So
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Love
Thank
you.
you for having me. Love you too. And we'll take this show on the road, y'all.
All
So,
right.
of
Yes.
course.
Yes. So reach out to April. Like she said, she's having these conversations in churches. She can do that also in corporations, organizations, friend groups, whatever it is. Reach out to her. She's on LinkedIn, like she's mentioned several times. So reach out to her. She's a joy to have as a friend. And I just love you, girl.
Love you too.
Take care. Bye.